Hello everyone, welcome to Coaster Hour, and today I'll be ranking all 17 coasters at Cedar Point. If you haven't watched my video ranking my most anticipated coasters at Cedar Point, I would suggest watching that before you watch this video, but if you haven't and just want to watch this, then that is fine, as I don't really think it is necessary to have watched the last video, but it would make this video interesting as you could see which coasters surprised me and which didn't. With all that said, let's get right into my rankings. Coming in at number 17 is the only coaster I didn't ride at Cedar Point, which is Wilderness Run. And this is just a simple kiddie coaster that is only really significant because it was the first coaster built by Intamin. And so by default, many people say this is the worst coaster at the park, and that is why I have it at number 17. At number 16, we have the Cedar Creek Mine Ride, and this is an Aero Mine Train coaster, and is the only coaster at Cedar Point I just absolutely did not like, and I did despise this coaster. This coaster is very rough, and it just kind of beats you up. All you do is navigate this really dull and boring layout that mostly is just going through turns. There's not really one redeemable moment on this coaster, and if there is any coaster you can skip at Cedar Point, it would definitely be this one. For number 15, we have Woodstock Express, which is just a typical Vekoma Jr. coaster that is meant for kids and families to enjoy. This coaster is smooth and relatively tame, and it does its job as the park's family coaster, but it just isn't my kind of ride, unlike some of the other coasters at the park. Corkscrew, the Aero Looper, comes in at number 14, and this coaster has its good and bad moments. Surprisingly, Corkscrew has two unexpectedly strong airtime moments, and the corkscrews are decent, but after you land back in your seat on those airtime hills and the vertical loop, it is painful, and the track overall is pretty rough. But this ride did have some good moments, so I can't dislike it too much. Number 13 is Wicked Twister, the Intamin Impulse coaster that does have some fun launches and decently intense twists, but doesn't offer up much more than that, and somehow was still disappointing even though I wasn't even expecting that much, as Wicked Twister just felt a little too repetitive for me. At number 12, I have the classic Aero suspended coaster, Iron Dragon. And I thought this coaster was actually a pretty fun ride, even if it is more family oriented. It is actually pretty smooth, and the highlights of the ride are definitely the great first drop and the entire second half of this ride, which is actually pretty exciting and fun, especially compared to the more slowly paced and graceful first half. This may be an unpopular opinion, but I do prefer Iron Dragon over Ninja at Six Flags Magic Mountain, as I had a great time riding this coaster. The B&M dive coaster Valravn comes in at number 11, and before people get mad about where I rank it, I did think this ride was pretty fun, and I especially enjoyed the first drop and the 0G roll, and the other inversions were fine as well, but what held this ride back for me was the B&M vest restraints. They were not very comfortable, and combine that with a layout that was just nothing too special, and you get a ride that isn't quite the best, but it's still pretty fun, so that is why Valravn comes in at number 11. Starting off the top 10 is Rougarou, the B&M floorless coaster, and I was actually pretty impressed with this coaster. The first drop was pretty awesome, and I enjoyed every inversion on this coaster, and I thought that Rougarou had some really nice pacing, and I think the second half of the coaster, while not as good as the first half, is still pretty fun, as you get a solid sensation of speed, and I think this coaster is one that receives a little too much hate, and I did enjoy it as I mentioned, so that is why Rougarou is coming in at number 10. The oldest coaster still operating at Cedar Point, Blue Streak, comes in at number 9. This coaster is full of great floater airtime moments, and while it is a bit rough, it is running pretty well for its age. The first drop is also great, and as a fan of classic wooden coasters, while not one of my absolute favorites, Blue Streak still shows that just because a coaster is old or older, doesn't mean that it is a bland or bad ride, and it can still be a very fun and good time. For number 8, I will give a trigger warning before I get into this ride because I know a lot of people really like this coaster, but with all that said, I have Magnum XL-200 at number 8. This coaster was easily the biggest disappointment of the trip, and I really wanted to love this coaster. I mean, it is quite possibly the most influential roller coaster ever built. I'd never want to see Magnum taken down, and I still thought this ride was fun and good, but it just wasn't exactly or even close to what I was hoping for. The first half of the ride is actually not too amazing or exciting, which was unfortunate, and while the second half of the ride has a lot of very strong ejector airtime hills, all the airtime moments feel way too short or brief. As soon as I noticed I was up, I was down again. Also, the restraints really took away from the ride to me, as the airtime moments could be extremely painful, and because of this, I have Magnum at number 8. I still enjoyed this coaster a bit, but it just wasn't exactly what I was hoping for. Gemini, the Aero Hybrid coaster, is 7th on the list, and this ride is just really fun and pretty smooth. You get some awesome airtime on this coaster, and even though I never got a racing ride on this run, it was still really fun, and I like how this coaster has mostly a wooden coaster kind of a layout, except toward the end when it does that sharp turn, which makes this coaster really unique to me, at least of the coasters I've ridden, and I think this coaster is one of the most underrated at the park. Number 6 is Gatekeeper, the iconic B&M wing coaster, and let me say that this coaster is also a fun coaster. My favorite moments on Gatekeeper are the wing over drop, which is the first drop, and the inversion going through the keyholes, as you feel like the keyholes are shrinking as you approach them. It's just really awesome. Here, the vest restraints weren't too bothersome, and Gatekeeper is just a great coaster that definitely is deserving of being an icon at Cedar Point. Now the top 5 is where we really kick things up a notch. All of these coasters are in my top 15 overall, and at number 5 we have Raptor, my favorite B&M invert of all time. This coaster is just incredible. It just whips through its inversions and helix toward the end at such a quick pace. Raptor is intense, well paced and smooth, and I can easily see why some people see this as one of the best B&M inverts in the United States. At number 4, I have Millennium Force, which was the first ever Giga Coaster ever built. And this was for sure a very fun ride with a fantastic first drop, a great first overbank turn, and a nice speed hill toward the end of the ride. And the sensation of speed was just really cool. It made this a really neat experience. But with that said, I was still a little disappointed with Millennium Force, as some of the hills didn't give much airtime, at least as much as I wanted, and there were some less interesting moments of the ride. But still, this coaster is a very good ride, a great ride even, and especially at night, that is where it shines. The biggest surprise of the trip is coming in at number 3, and it is Top Thrill Dragster, the first Stratocoaster or coaster over 400 feet ever built, and this is a coaster you must ride in the front row. The launch is just insane. The wind in your face, it's absolutely unbelievable. The top hat offers some fun floater airtime and a great view from 420 feet high in the air, and there's never a dull moment on this ride, and this coaster is definitely among the elite coasters in the world. So for that reason, Top Thrill Dragster is coming in at number 3. At number 2, I have the amazing Intamin Blitz coaster Maverick. This ride is incredible. Maverick has great ejector airtime, a really intense second launch, crazy rapid transitions, the best first drop at Cedar Point in my opinion, and some fun inversions. This coaster really is the full package, and this coaster is one that shows that stats aren't everything, and a coaster can be an amazing ride, even if its height, speed, all of that isn't too amazing on paper. And of course, coming in at number 1 is Steel Vengeance, the RMC hybrid coaster that many believe is the greatest roller coaster ever built. And for me, it definitely lived up to the hype, as it delivered an absolutely bonkers and amazing ride. There are so many amazing moments on this ride that for me, it is difficult to pick the best moment. But for me, some of my favorite moments were the first drop, which is fantastic, tall outer banked airtime hill, and of course the entire second half of Steel Vengeance, which is probably the best half of any coaster ever or out there. It is just insane, intense, paced really well, and it is just filled with amazing airtime. I'll make a review for Steel Vengeance in the future where I'll go more in depth with the layout and my experience, but just know that at least to me, this coaster definitely deserves the praise it gets, and it is absolutely an amazing world-class ride. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, then stay tuned for my upcoming reviews for Maverick, Magnum XL-200, Millennium Force, and Steel Vengeance, as well as more coaster-related content here on Coaster Hour.